So as previously mentioned, we're working on the details page now. So the details page will be clicked on from the main list page. You'll click details next to a person. And what you'll expect to see is the person's name and then 3 tables, one of their phone numbers, one of their addresses, and one of their addresses, email addresses and addresses. So what I did was I manually entered in some data here. We know that person ID 1 is Michael Mail. Normally you wouldn't add data to a lot of tables manually, but we don't have any interface to insert data in there yet. We're creating that interface, and it's easier to build it when there is some data in there. Sometimes you do want to fudge some data like this, and then you can clean it up later and delete it and whatever you need to do. But for now, I inserted in 3 phone numbers, 2 email addresses, and as you see here, in each one of these, I have person ID 1. That's how I tie it back to that person, and 2 addresses. So this is what we have. So what we want to do is recall that on the index page, there was a details link, and that details link sends a person ID, and the person ID is of the person in that row, right? So real simple. So what we need is a page called details. Add. Here's a page, empty. And we're going to call it details. So it comes with standard code behind. We'll get to this one in this part in just a second. Let's start with the page. So we said we want to receive a person ID. So get means that you're sending anything you're sending to it, to a page, you're sending in the query string. So in other words, details question mark person ID equals, you're sending it through this type of method. You can send methods other ways. Form variables are sent without showing them in the browser typically. Now a form can be sent as a action type get as opposed to action type post, but most of the time a form, you're trying to send it more secretly. It sends it as a document, and that document is sent without a query string. So it's posted. It's called on post. But we're not worried about any of that. We're just doing this as demo stuff. So we're going to say int person ID equals 0. When you say equals something, you're saying that the parameter is optional. It would be probably a decent idea to make it not be optional in this case for the details page, whereas on the edit pages for the phone number and edit for the person, we'll explain this in a minute, but if I send it as 0, I'm saying it's a new person, right? But in this case, I can't show details for a new person because the person doesn't exist. So technically I could do this without, but it's kind of my practice to always have an optional parameter for a lot of stuff. So we'll get there, and I'll show you some other stuff here. So this page, we're going to be showing data. First, we have to load some data in on this page. Well, where do we load the data in? We load it from the DB context. If you recall, on the index page, we had DB context, and we received it in on the class initializer. So very similar on the details page. So we're just going to copy this stuff and paste it. And then we're going to change around what we need to change around. First of all, you see here we need our usings. So if we do this stuff, we get our usings. We know that this is not a list of people or a list of persons. It is a person. So we're going to make it a person object. You know that this is details model. So this dot person equals new person and a new list of persons. Okay, so that's all set. So we don't have anything we've loaded yet. We've just set up the class and initialized it and have it ready to go. When we want to load stuff in is on this on get. And we want to load in all the stuff we need for the page to be able to be displayed, for us to be able to draw the stuff on the page, right? Well, what do we want to draw on the page? We want the first and last name of the person. We want an edit button that we can click with their ID. We want a list of their phone numbers their email addresses and their addresses. So we know we need to load in all of those things, right? So the ID we're getting right here, so that's good. So if person ID is greater than 0, we can load them in, and if not, else we can throw an exception. So this is how we'll cover if they send in a 0. We'll just say person not found. So in here, we want to load that person from the DB context, right? So we say this dot person equals this dot DB context dot persons dot first or default, right? What that says, read you this whole statement. So what this says is this dot person equals from the list of people, the first one that matches this condition. What means by or default is if I can't find one that meets this condition, then I'm going to return null to the person object. All right, so naturally I want to make sure it's not null. So I say if this dot person is null, can't do equals null because null doesn't equal anything, right? So you want to say if it is null, then throw the exception. Person not found. Very simple, right? Now we've loaded the person. We need to load in the person's addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses, right? So this dot person dot start with phone numbers equals this dot DB context dot phone numbers dot. Now we want to get a list. So we don't want to do first or default. We'd only get one. So we want to say where it meets certain conditions. So we do person.person ID because there is no person ID property directly on there. Okay, so it's red underlined because it's not the right type. So we want to cast it as a list. And we're good to go. Okay, so we want that for email addresses. We want that for addresses. Okay, so now we've loaded everything we need to load to display our page. Now we need to actually write the page out, right? So how do we write the page out? What do we want on that page? Well, the first thing we want to do is we can set a title just for neatness sake, right? So set a title. So say view data. And we could set it to the person's name if we wanted to. Matter of fact, we can do that. So we'll say, let's just say details. So notice we can just say model dot because we got the details model. That's actually being sent from here to here as loaded. So we've got model dot person dot first name. And this is the title of the page. What does that mean? It's the title at the top of the page. So it says, like instead of saying Google, it'll say details : /. That's up above the address bar in the actual toolbar. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to display the person's name. So we're going to do it in the same format as from the HTML or from the index page, right? So we'll copy the index page's header, copy this much of it, right? And we want We want to say, I guess just name, colon, and then we want, so to do some razor code, you just put an @, say html.raw, which means just display what I tell you to. If you don't, sometimes it'll HTML encode it, which gets a little crazy. So just know that it's a good idea to just do this way. So here I'm saying just display raw, the person's first name, space, last name. You can leave it out, and sometimes you'll end up having to put it in, sometimes you won't. It's just, it's as far as the HTML raw thing goes. So now we've got a div for the content itself. The first thing we'll probably want to put on the page is an edit button. We can actually put that. So the reason we want to do an edit button is because you don't want to have to go back out to the page. Let's say I go click on details and I'm like, oh, that's not right. And I click edit. I can now edit this person without having going back out to the list. So I'll put this up here. So we'll say href equals / and I want to say edit. We don't have an edit page yet, but we will. Obviously, we know we need it because it's actually referenced on the index page as well. Question mark person ID equals @model.personID, person.personID. And you will notice that every once in a while it'll mess around with where it's putting the period when I do this stuff. So just gotta be careful and watch it. So I'm just gonna say edit. So far, this page should render just simply the person's first name, last name, and an edit button. That's what we should see. So now we should be able to click on the edit button and at least see that much, right? So here we are at the home page. Any one of them, I click details, and I can see first name and last name, and an edit button that goes to person ID 1. I go back out and I click on Django, same thing, edit person ID 2. So working fine, right? So now we want to list out the addresses, email addresses, and phone numbers for each one of these people. So let's start with phone number. So let's start out with each one of these. Let's put them in a div. Excuse me. So let's say, so a div is just in HTML is just a place we're dividing up the page. It's a box that everything will be in. It doesn't really matter. I'm just kind of letting you know this doesn't matter too much. So say that, and we'll say phone numbers. Now, what do we want to be able to do from a list of phone numbers? A good action would be to add a new phone number, right? So what is that? That's editing a phone number with ID 0, but with this person ID's person ID. So I'm going to actually copy this. And I'm going to change a few things around. So this is edit phone number with a person ID equal to the person's ID. I'm sorry. So this is to create a new one. So person ID equals 0. I'm sorry, correction. This one is the person's ID because the phone number's ID will be 0. So I'll say here, phone number ID equals 0, and then you ampersand to separate your parameters. So in other words, I'm saying edit a phone number that doesn't exist yet, but for this person, right? So I'm sending that to the page so it'll know to tie it to the person, but it'll be a new one. And we'll get into that more when we get to the edit phone number page when we get there. We know now we want a table. So table, and let's just copy the table details from the other page, the table header and stuff. So let's just copy all the way to T-body. And table body. table. So what are the columns for phone number? It's just the number. And that's it, the actions. The actions we'd want to take on it are edit and delete. That's it. We don't need to say details, because what is the details of a phone number? It's just the number, and we can show that on a table, right? So there's no reason to have a details page for it. So let's copy this. And let's change these to TDs. And let's actually put the number in here. So this is actually in a loop. So we'll do for each. I would fully qualify your objects just like in the last one. So we want to do green pages lib dot models dot phone number. In model dot person dot phone numbers. So for each one of these, we're going to draw a row, right? So we know that much. Let's copy this into there. So far. And let's bounce this out, actually. I like this better out here. So we want to display the phone number itself. So underscore phone number. Oh, I'm sorry. Do an at sign. That gets you into Razor. Underscore phone number. Dot number. And actions available would be so we want to create a unordered list. 2 list items. Both of them links. So href equals. We want one to say edit. And the page is edit phone number, which also is the way we add recall. But now we have a phone number ID. So guess what? We don't need a person ID on that one. Makes sense so far? So here we want to say edit phone number, question mark, phone number ID equals at, and we want to say underscore phone number dot number ID. So that has all the information we need to actually edit a phone number. We don't need the person ID because the record for that phone number ID already has a person ID. So we'll work out in edit phone number on its get what we need and what we don't need, and we'll throw errors where we need to and stuff. Same thing for delete. In this case, delete. Obviously, we only need the phone number ID, right? So we'll call this delete phone number. And that's it. So I would press play right now and just make sure that this works. I'm so confident that it works, though, that I'm actually just going to copy this and paste it twice and then do some Control H to replace for my other 2 divs. It's that simple. And then we'll just be done with this page. So here we'll do the second time. So second one here, we're going to replace phone number with address. Let's do email. Obviously, you see I practiced. Okay, so let's just quickly look at it. We changed all phone number to phone number, email to email address. It didn't pluralize this right, so we can fix that. And we need the actual field here, which is email. Other than that, that was a pretty good replace, right? So let's do a replace here. We'll change it to address. And obviously this one's going to be a little bit more complicated, but and I'll explain why in a second. Phone number replaced with address, and phone number, phone space number. Oh, phone space number replaced with address. Same thing. Okay, as you see here, address is. And it looks like it didn't do a great job on the first replace. Probably my fault, that little skip step. Anybody see what I'm doing wrong? Let's just give it a little shot. Replace. Oh, because it's got a space at the beginning of it. There we go. All right, let's do it now. Good to go. Address is. I bet I missed something up here. Email address is. Okay, so address has a lot more fields, right? So let's look at them. Well, let's just say address. And let's do a little just writing of the address out in one field. So address dot line 1, BR, which is a line break, right? Address line 2, and then city, state, and zip on another line. So this will look good. Address line 2, and then should be a 2, dot city, and a space. Let's close this stuff. At store address dot state, and there's always a comma after city, comma address dot state. And remember before I did say I do like to use that HTML raw stuff. I could do that here. Let's just see what happens. Sometimes, you know, it's a little cranky, sometimes it's not. And then a couple spaces at address dot zip. Okay. So edit address, delete address, edit address. Yeah, it looks like we're good to go. So we should be able to press play, and this page should theoretically work. Details, and theory becomes reality. So phone numbers, we got 3, got an edit and delete button. Got an edit and delete button. Looking pretty good. We don't need the edit button there. We want it to say add, not edit. So we'll change that. Plus add new phone number. Add new email address. Add new address. And I also noticed that these TDs should be line left. And then that should do it. Looks like everything else worked great. All right, one last quick look, and I think we're done with this page. Details, much better. Everything's looking pretty good. One last thing I'll check. What does it look like with Django? Good, perfect. It's empty, no errors, everything's great. All right, so now we'll get to the edit page, which is reachable from either here or here. So then we'll be a few more pages and we'll be totally done. All right, thanks.